Welcome to our TV network, your ultimate destination for all things exciting and essential. From mouth-watering food to the latest in fashion, health, education, music, movies, and news, plus thrilling sports and breathtaking travel. Our TV network brings it all to you. Tune in today and experience the best of every world, all in one place, rtv.network.
Hello and welcome to Connect Caribe Report here on Callaloo Alliance Media, our TV network. We've got a packed program today covering a very important matter for the Caribbean region. Today's program, we are focusing on the theme, Cultivating the Future, Agriculture and Agri-tech in the Caribbean. Coming up in Connect Caribe World with Ambassador Dr. Andre Thomas is Mr. Gavin Bovell. He is a representative of the Guyana Office for Investment, and he is also a logistics and supply chain consultant. Also coming up in the spotlight is our featured guest, Mr. Sean Ball. He's the Program Manager, Agriculture and Agro-Industrial Development for CARICOM Secretariat. I'm Jennifer Hyland, your host for this week's episode, and joining today are my co-hosts, John Clendenin of the IC Group, Chris Principe, publisher of the Financial IT. And through Connect Caribbean, we are bridging the islands, uniting communities, and unlocking new possibilities for the entire region. So stay tuned as we dive into the stories and innovations that are shaping the Caribbean's bright future. This is your front row seat to the next wave of regional transformation we are covering here on Connect Caribbean Report. Feel free to comment or pose a question in the comment section on your preferred social media platform. We'll be right back with Ambassador Thomas and his guest, Gavin Bovell, in Connect Caribbean World right after these messages.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The U.S. is stepping up egg imports and boosting support to chicken farmers to combat its worst ever outbreak of avian flu that sent egg prices to a record of over $8 a dozen. As part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's 5-year plan, the nation will look to import between 70 million and 100 million eggs during the next month or two. Saks Global is laying off around 5% of its U.S. corporate workforce as it integrates its recent acquisition, Neiman Marcus. According to an internal memo seen by Bloomberg News, the layoffs will affect employees in departments including finance, legal, and operations. And Warner Brothers Discovery is closing 3 video game studios as part of a refocusing plan to boost profitability. Monolith Productions, Player First Games, and Warner Brothers Games San Diego are being closed, as well as a highly anticipated Wonder Woman title. The company also has plans to retool some of its franchises. The shutdown follows a difficult 2024, with last year's games underperforming. Kimberly Adams.
You're muted, Dr. Thomas. You're muted.
Good afternoon and welcome to Connect Caribe World. And I have with me today Gavin Bovell, who is no stranger to all things Connect Caribe. So it's great to have you on the program, Gavin.
It's very good to be here. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Absolutely. We can hear you clearly and see you quite well.
Okay, because
Okay.
my screen is a bit frozen on this end, but
I
that's
see.
fine.
Okay.
Good to be here.
Yes. So let's really get into it. What I wanted to really us to really focus on is how do we turn the possibilities of the present in the area of Guyana playing a pivotal role in reducing food import bills into reality and overcome some of the challenges that we face. As you know, we are working in the Connect Caribe project. We're about one step from implementation, so we're in a very good place. But we've had to scale significant challenges. And I tell people executing this project is like climbing Mount Everest. If it was easy, it would have been done before.
Well,
And
correct.
so those who want to commentate, they should jump in and climb the mountain with us. Okay. so so let's I mean so let's so what are your what's your perspective on in terms of how do we take this possibility um, of turning the promise of Guyana uh, into significantly reducing food imports and overcoming the significant challenges that we face.
Thank you for having me. And I think Jennifer did a wonderful job of introducing me. I am, again, the investment and trade specialist with the Guyana Office for Investment. And I also coordinate the master's program for logistics and supply chain management at the University of the West Indies. Before we jump into understanding how do we combat it, I just came off of AgroFest 2025, where we brought in from Guyana about 80 agro processors and primary produce farmers into
Well,
Barbados. And it was one of the largest delegations that we've ever fielded. Now, a number of challenges were encountered in the acquisition, in the execution of this. High transportation costs, limited infrastructure, bureaucracy and customs procedures, lack of coordination, and because we're dealing with perishable goods, we have to emphasize that there's the risk of spoilage and loss.
hmm,
So in the region, I think where the ferry comes in is that it is going to definitely enhance the sea-based, the maritime options that are available. We have the aviation and inventory. However, we know those are usually associated with higher costs, and that does not necessarily allow commercial parties to be competitive when compared with imports from North America and Europe and even some parts of Latin America and South America. Because of the massive scale at which they're able to produce, their per unit price is lower. And that is one of the main challenges. Another thing that hinders this intra-regional travel, especially for cargo, is deficiencies in the port infrastructure, right? We have a huge problem with our cold chain facilities, right? We don't have enough, and where they are, they're not adequate, right? Inland transportation is a bit better, right, at moving the goods, but it's still expensive, right? Especially when we're looking at places like Barbados, Guyana, moving around perishable produce in a manner that allows it to maintain and enhance the shelf life. Moving produce from places in like Perica, Essequibo to the port in Georgetown can be very high. And in order for us to do so in a way that enhances the shelf life or preserves that shelf life, we need to have the right type of vehicles and the right type of infrastructure to sustain those vehicles and sustain temperatures that allows vegetables and fruits in its primary form to get to port and get to the end consumer so that they can have the maximum amount of shelf life. I was showing around one of my colleagues and one of my exhibitors this year in one of the supermarkets in Barbados, and I mentioned to them before going, we almost never see green plantains in the supermarket because between the point of harvesting and the time that it's on the shelf, we always have that sort of ripening effect. All right, and that's because we don't have sufficient cold storage facilities. And I'm subject to be corrected by any one of my partner members, because again, we want to make sure that we grow together. So there are initiatives that are taking place that may not necessarily be within the public view, um, to enhance these challenges. One of the other things that I encountered, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, is paperwork and the bureaucracy. One of the problems that we encountered is animal product having not the right met the right requirements for entry into the Barbados, not because of the product itself, but because the paperwork was not filed. And where that paperwork should have been filed with, and the information surrounding who is responsible for this approval and regulatory oversight was not available to these producers. And that in some cases is one of the main challenges. And it's not that the regulators are unwilling or are not knowledgeable. They want to be engaged. They want to ensure that when producers come to them, they're facilitating and not necessarily having an adversarial relationship. But there needs to be a bit more coordination across the region as it relates to our sanitary and phytosanitary conditions and regulations, as well as making sure that there is a clear process step by step from one jurisdiction to the next as to who is responsible for which paperwork so that we can ensure as we engage with the ferry, these things are provided, the right personnel is notified, and there's a central hub for information here as well. So that's just some of the challenges and the possible solutions are highlighted within there, right?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask you one more question. What's your view on the proposed port by the Guyana government, that's Parika, and how suitable do you feel it is? And because we're obviously definitely contemplating on utilizing that. I mean, when we start in short order, but it would have to be increased as versus Guyana, as versus Georgetown. So practically, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? What's required to make that port work, since it's the government's preference?
I think it's a game changer in terms of
Yeah.
it would likely be a very hold a strategic role in fostering regional connectivity,
Mm,
supporting food security goals, and strengthening our supply chains. Because it's not only going to help to alleviate some of the congestions at the port in Georgetown, but it's also going to encourage foreign investment, right? In from different companies that are engaged in logistic services, even manufacturing companies and raw material suppliers that are going to rethink how they look at the supply chain and the access that Guyana has not only to its own natural resources, which are vast, but to those natural resources of countries like Brazil.
So, Gavin, what are we going to do? We're going to have an opportunity to revisit some of the challenges and issues that you pose. And I'm really glad that you were able to give a broad picture because we talk a lot about in terms of the theory, but it's good to hear about the entrepreneurs and the farmers and the producers and the agri stakeholders who are actually living the challenges that we speak about here on this program. But so what we'll do, we'll come back. You have an opportunity to come back in Connected Voices and let's expand more as we hear the other hosts in Connecting the Dots coming up to really take a deep dive in terms of the issues that we've presented here in Connect Caribbean World with Ambassador Dr. Andrew Thomas. But we're out of time for the first segment, but stay with us. Gavin will be back in segment 4 in Connected Voices, but we'll be right back after these messages, and we'll return with Connecting the Dots with John Cadenet and Mike Principe.
With the Bloomberg Small Business Report, I'm John Tucker, brought to you by Dell.com. Small business owners are experiencing delays in bankruptcy proceedings and rising costs when government creditors fail to vote on the restructuring plans. Government entities like the Small Business Administration that hold debt against a company often refrain from voting on those businesses' restructuring plans, even if they don't oppose the plans. The practice can leave restructuring proposals without necessary creditor support. Companies are then frequently unable to access the immediate debt discharge they would otherwise secure in bankruptcy. Subchapter 5, part of the Chapter 11 used by small businesses, requires unanimous acceptance by all impaired creditor classes for consensual plan approvals. If a creditor, like the SBA, doesn't consent to the plan, Subchapter 5 mandates that debtors commit their projected disposable income to creditors for at least 3 to 5 years. And that's the Bloomberg's.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Connecting the Dots. Chris, nice to see you here with us again this week. And this afternoon, we're going to be talking about the great potential of agriculture to contribute to the Caribbean's economic development. There's opportunities for export-led growth and food security, which is important for all of us. There's significant challenges as we look at putting these dots together, and they include climate change in general, soil degradation, limited access to finance, which I'll ask Chris to comment on. And we're also looking at an era of innovation. So there's agri-tech solutions such as precision agriculture, vertical farming, there's aquaponics, mobile apps for farmers. And then we need to look at the connecting of the regional cooperation, and such as the ferry services and some of the things that were talked about with our guest, with Dr. Thomas. So when we look at agriculture in general, I'd like to start off by looking at the limited access to finance and infrastructure, and turn it over to Chris to talk about, how do these smallholder farmers struggle to access credit and financing for modern equipment and the other things that we know are necessary. Chris? I'm not hearing your mic, Chris. So as Chris is getting his voice together, I'll switch and talk a little bit with Anthony, because I think one of the aspects of connecting the dots is with agritourism. So we're looking here, for example, in St. Croix, when we look at tourism is one of the major aspects right now for economic growth in the Caribbean. We're looking at different ways of how does agriculture fit in with tourism. So, for example, we have the annual Agri-Fest, which we just had last week, where we have farmers coming in from throughout the Caribbean region. We're looking at how do we take our existing infrastructure, like on St. Croix, we have Annalee Farms, which is the home of the Seminole cows. We have a new startup venture with sugarcane to look at a boutique rum factory. We have the Louette's Museum that looks at different orchards and what were done in the heyday of the Virgin Islands. Sager Farms with Dr. Brown has a significant opportunity to have people that come in on the tourist ships come and see what's happening here. So, Anthony, do you have any comments on how does the economics of tourism segue to what we can do in agriculture?
Yeah, certainly. Understanding the fundamentals of this discussion around the industry, self-agriculture, and agriculture and technology. But you first can't address this issue without addressing the fundamentals of supply and demand. That is the core of how you determine the viability of an industry and the market opportunities. I can't speak for the rest of CARICOM, but what I can speak of with some limited knowledge of the Virgin Islands, scalability and critical mass obviously determine whether or not we have the ability to sustain and feed ourselves as a territory. We are part of the United States, and so everything from infrastructure, the logistics in terms of supply chain, all of those things play an important role in that. Realistically, I believe where we are as a territory, and as we address having less dependency on imports and looking at an opportunity for export, I believe where we are right now at this juncture is agritourism. Well, I say that because you have the farming community, whether collectively, individually, are producing whatever it is they're producing, but doing that at a limited capacity. I believe, and I think it's the same case with the rest of the Caribbean, that in the pockets of those farms, there is an opportunity to develop and produce a product around agritourism business. Because as visitors come to your destination, they're coming for that experience. And coming to the farms and actually experiencing the local farm experience, whether engaging in picking whatever the vegetables or fruits, and they're able to then take back with them whatever it is they would like to take back with them as being part of that experience in that destination. So I think fundamentally, as we talk about how we address the challenges in infrastructure, transportation, logistics, how do we get to market? The U.S. Virgin Islands is going to play a very pivotal role in the Connect Caribe ecosystem, because what we do fundamentally is we bring market access between ourselves and the Caribbean and the rest of the United States.
Okay. Thank you, Anthony, for that. I'd like to just comment on some of the technical aspects, because the things that we're talking about also need some sorts of regulatory reform and some infrastructure capabilities for our small and medium-sized businesses and these farmers. For example, when we go across borders, we have the customs, border police, phytosanitary, weights and measures, agriculture, and the movement of raw agricultural materials, whether it's APHIS in the United States or in other countries, there's limited access to be able to bring fresh fruits and vegetables from one jurisdiction to another. And so we have the invitation of different types of nematodes and other crop-sensitive areas that need to be addressed. The other, from a supply chain perspective, is the vertical integration. So from tourism products, for example, if you're making sugarcane, it's hard to transport raw sugarcane. However, we can make rum, and rum can be transported. We can take our mangoes and make mango jelly and preserves.
Yeah, and you're right. You can curate those products. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are all things of connecting these dots of these ideas that we have for the future. But behind all of this is the finance. So I really want to hear from my co-host Chris to talk about some of those financial aspects, especially the limited access to finance, and particularly in the farming where it's not predictable how much crop is going to be yielded, and you need this structure to be able to be viable. Chris?
Hi, John. No, is this sounding a little bit better?
Yeah, this sounds great to hear your voice, sir.
Great. So let me dive right in on to the financial aspects. And the first thing to speak about is the agricultural business is a financial there's a lot of finance that's involved because it's such a long-term business. The cash conversion cycle for the typical agro industry participant is rather long. So from initially, you have the infrastructure and the land and the cost and carrying costs associated with that, as well as being machinery intensive and labor intensive, and then you have the period of time when you're producing your product before it can actually come to market and be sold, and it's impacted by the weather, it's impacted by the viability of transportation as well as the cost of transportation, and each one of these areas need its own financing. And the challenge, particularly in the Caribbean, is that the de-risking process that so many of the major banks have left with fewer and fewer alternatives to be able to obtain the financing that's necessary, that is typical in many other countries when it comes to the agribusiness. And this puts a lot of pressure and makes the industry, from an investment standpoint, not as attractive as, say, some of the other industries. Now, on the technology side, really quick, AI is going to be a game changer in farming as it is in many other industries. There are so many apps today that really benefit farmers. There's the use of drones, which has become more and more impactful. So all of these things really present kind of a bright light going forward for the increase in production and quality of produce. And John, I'd just like to add is that I'll be pleased next week to be coming to you from Barcelona, Spain at the Mobile World Conference, which is one of the largest conferences, and they have specific sections of this event on the agricultural business.
That's wonderful, Chris. And as you know, I spent quite a bit of time in Spain and looking at their industries, and it's a wonderful opportunity to talk about agriculture in that way. One of the things that were mentioned by our first guest with Dr. Thomas was in the plantains and the no green plantains. And some of that has to do with the infrastructure of, I would say, connecting the dots is in the cold storage warehousing that's necessary. So when the farmer produces and harvests a crop, how do we get those, if we can get past, like with tomatoes? I have a small farm here in St. Croix with 1,000 indeterminate tomatoes, and as soon as they got one red spot, the thrush would come and attack the tomatoes. So we have to have infrastructure, not just in growing the crops, but protecting them, and then how do we proceed from there? But the cold storage warehousing, particularly like with plantains and bananas, you can put them in environments that are not only cold storage, but also have hydrogen and different things that prolong the life and the shipping. So when we talk about the ferry boats, it's not just having the transportation, but it's also having the proper kinds of transport and containers that can keep the crops viable. So at this point, I'd like to turn it back over to our anchor, Jennifer.
All right, thank you very much, John. There's so much to cover, so many areas and facets of that covers the challenges and the opportunities that presents itself in the agriculture sector. But I mean, we do have a great opportunity for our next guest coming up in the spotlight to be able to tackle some of the things that were raised in Connect Caribe World and here in Connecting the Dots. So we'll be right back. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Mr. Sean Bowe. He's the Program Manager, Agriculture and Agro-Industrial Development for the CARICOM Secretariat, and then we'll come back in Connected Voices and see how much we can do. Sure. We'll be back. Stay tuned.
TravelShare. It Marketplace is an innovative, dynamic, user-friendly, and fully comprehensive global travel marketplace, featuring all Caribbean islands as a premier destinations. TravelShare. It Marketplace featured daily travel news, arts, culture, events, travel weather news, individuals' remote work, flex time, paid time off, family leisure time, and travel deals to better connect the U.S., Caribbean, and the Americas worldwide. So no matter where you want to travel in the world for work or leisure, working remotely or on vacation by yourself, with friends or family, whether by air or sea, TravelShare. It Marketplace makes it easy to get you to your destination. Book now at www.travelshareit.com.
Welcome back to Connect Caribbean Report, and we are in the spotlight, and I'm so pleased to have as my guest in the spotlight Mr. Sean Bull. He's the Program Manager, Agriculture and Agro-Industrial Development for the CARICOM Secretariat. Welcome, Sean, to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I want to say good afternoon to your audience and your viewers and all the stakeholders who are on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great, wonderful to have you. And Sean, you've heard the theories, the challenges, the opportunities that have been presented. And from where you sit, I mean, you have a 360 view of the challenges and the opportunities that day in and day out that you cover as in your portfolio. But I would have loved to introduce you, but I mean, talk about your bio and all of that, but I want to get straight into this discussion. And I want to kick off by getting your broad view, first of all, as we consider the theme today. I want to begin by getting your perspective on the future of agriculture in the Caribbean, first, as it relates to policy. Some of the things that were discussed were policy issues. Some of the things that were discussed were technological innovation. And then we heard on the issue of trade. And so before we dive in, and then we'll come back in a little later and get more of your questions, and I hope that you can keep your answers as short as possible because I have so many questions. I don't know how I'm going to be able to get all of them answered. But before we look at policy and technological landscape and agri-trade and all of that, what key trends are you seeing that are shaping the future of agriculture here in the Caribbean, and how can the region navigate the current challenges that you've heard while capitalizing on the emerging opportunities for growth and sustainability? We don't want to focus on all of the problems. We need to discuss the problems, but what are you seeing happening right now before we dive deep into additional questions that I have for you?
All right, thank you much. I think first thing I want to point out, and it's a theme that is running across, there are opportunities in the Caribbean region. There are real opportunities. Opportunities as it relates to trade, opportunities as it relates to commerce, agricultural development, production, agro-processing, investment. There are opportunities, and I think that's the first thing we want to point out. And I'll touch a bit of them. Firstly, let's put a value to this opportunity. Firstly, the region has what we call a 2025 program that's on. And it's really to reduce the region's food import bill by 25% by the year 2025. I'm happy to announce that it has also been extended further to 2030, given the feedback we've gotten and also the successes and achievements that we've been experiencing. Now, I want to add a value to this. At a very conservative estimate based on research done by the CARICOM private sector organization, there's close to a 1.4 billion US dollar opportunity in the agri-industry. And that's a very conservative estimate that took place, that was done by the CPSO. There are opportunities in meat, fruits and vegetables, logistics and transportation. There are opportunities as it relates to processing and primary production. And this is a real figure. And this is what the whole program of the 25 by 25 was based on. That is the value and the commodities that support it. Now, what are the trends that we're seeing? More and more, we're seeing increased interest in cross-border investment, meaning countries within the Caribbean, in the CARICOM setup, want to trade, want to invest in each other. So we're seeing people setting up processing facilities, whether it be coconut, whether it be other processed vegetables, whether it be shadows, whether it be berries. We're also seeing people looking to invest in technology, which is in keeping what the theme is today. And investing in technology, not only primary production technology, but also post-harvest, also processing, and even more important, human resource development and human capacity building. We're seeing a heavy trend there where persons would have gone to the university, studied, whether it be robotics, computer programming, and design, engineering. We're now seeing those persons applying those skills in the sector here in the Caribbean, and that's an encouraging trend. And this responds to certain issues of climate change and the need for sustainable production and sustained production, a matter of fact, and how we pretty much utilize the resources that we have. We've seen trends in that. I heard about AI earlier. That's something that's been incorporated in the region and the universities and the learning institutions. And I dare say that the average stakeholder has also been applying that into how it is that they do agriculture. So we're seeing some of those.
Very wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much for that response. I mean, you touched on some areas that I wanted to address, but given the challenges that were presented in terms of regional trade, logistics and all of that, but as you said, there's some positive shifts towards fostering a more resilient and self-sufficient agricultural sector in the Caribbean. But from your standpoint, based on the challenges that Gavin presented in Connect Caribbean World, with the bureaucracy and not showing who they need to connect with, what does the individual governments, and in terms of policy changes that you believe are most critical then to help boost the efforts to strengthen the small farmers, the agri-processors who want to introduce their products to other Caribbean islands? And obviously we're talking about strengthening food security, but if they themselves are having challenges, that means there is a policy issue. There's something that has to be addressed. So can you touch on that? What policy changes do you believe are most critical to help in efforts such as what Gavin introduced earlier?
First thing I want to say, these challenges aren't insurmountable. I think that's the first premise we need to move on. And yes, there are challenges. We live in a real world. There are in fact challenges. The region has been formulating policy responses for this, whether it be SPS, whether it be transportation and logistics, whether it be post-harvest, and it's coming together in various areas because there's a special ministerial task force on food production and food security who have highlighted these, in fact, priority areas that are being tackled systematically. Now, remember, this is a long-standing problem, so we're moving at them one step at a time, but at a pace that is responsive to the needs of the people. And let me get into it a little bit more. On the SPS side, we've managed as a region to now have a trade in animal and animal products policy that has been long in the making. Since we've launched the Special Ministerial Task Force, we've been able to approve that, and countries are now implementing that. If we look on the financing side, we've started to engage in a deliberate program to de-risk the sector. De-risk meaning insurance, creative financing, alternate financing. We've been able to put in place an insurance scheme that the region can now benefit from through our partners. That is now ready to go and is now being implemented and taken up by various states. We speak about the ferry service that some member states have started to implement and they're now working on. And this encompasses just about everything because it also takes into account the SPS issues, the time-sensitive issues because we're trading with perishables, and how it is that we get that information out to the right persons. And at the end of the year, we expect to have what is called a pre-clearance mechanism that should speed up the time that it takes to move goods throughout the region. And this should translate in better, should be improved doing business between countries, should improve reliability as it relates to information and getting things out to the respective stakeholders. And it goes into what I'm talking about, which is getting the information out, getting information to persons, and letting them know what's available. And I think that's an area that we really want to build on. That's the communication and getting information to the right person. Because as the speaker said before, the information is there. It's not a case that people are unwilling to share it, but we want to build on it so we can get it out more to persons.
Wonderful. I see that the time in our segment is practically gone, and I'm going to ask publicly here if you'd be willing to come back so that we can, obviously dig a little deeper and talk about, there are persons who are listening, farmers, agribusiness, and agripreneurs, and they really want us, I believe, to dig down into not just beyond the policy and the theory, but what are some of the practical steps that they can take and solutions? The information is in silos. Obviously, there are websites, there are some redundancies, and I think that's an area that we need to work on. But I want to squeeze in this quick question, Sean, and just be mindful that we're out of time, but I really want to get your take considering the unique agricultural strengths and challenges of Dominica, Guyana, and Suriname. And we've heard a lot about Guyana, but Dominica is known for its thriving agriculture sector. It's positioned itself as a leader in organic farming and climate resistance agriculture. So what lessons can be learned from Dominica's sustainability initiatives, and how can they be scaled across the region? And then when we come back, we'll see if we can get into some other questions. I'm sure that the rest of the team also have questions for you. And I hope that Gavin and yourself can come back so that we can dig a little deeper into this very important subject. But over to you.
I think to answer your question, it's important to remember as a region, there's constant sharing of best practices. There's constant sharing of experiences. And one of the beauties that we've had over the past 3-4 years with the establishment of the Special Ministerial Task Force is sharing the experiences of each member state, what works best, what didn't work, how it is that we can modify and so on. So different member states, including Dominica, including Belize, Jamaica, Trinidad, and so on, they have stories that are to be told, and each member state have been trading, have been talking, have been having exchanges of views and experience and technical information and technical knowledge. So there's been a pull from each to see how best it can be used, because the similarities across the region are pretty much the same. And where there are success stories, there's been this technical assistance program to share that knowledge between member states.
Thank you, Sean. Well, we're out of time for this segment in the spotlight, but I hope that when we come back in Connected Voices, we can talk more about the promise of improving productivity and sustainability in Caribbean agriculture when it comes to technology adoption like AI, IoT, Internet of Things. And we want to talk a little bit more about finance. What steps is CARICOM taking to improve financial inclusion, market access, and capacity building programs for these agricultural stakeholders? I know we have also Caribbean Export that's doing their part, but we really would love to hear what is the big picture view on what CARICOM, if you are permitted to share with us what's happening there on that front. But we'll bring all the voices back together in Connected Voices right after this commercial break.
Reimagine a world where the Caribbean is seamlessly connected, where our people, our cultures, and our economies move freely across the islands. This is Connect Caribe, more than a ferry service. It's the heartbeat of a new era, an era where economic opportunities expand, where trade flows freely across our seas, and cultural exchange flourishes. We are linking businesses, empowering communities, and reigniting the hope for a truly integrated Caribbean. Together, we're shaping a brighter, more unified future for the Caribbean. Connect Caribbean, connecting our islands, our people, our future.
Welcome back to Connect Caribbean Report, where we're talking about the future of agriculture here in the Caribbean. And we also have perspective of USVI in connecting the dots. But we want to bring all the voices, bring to bear, and talk about some of the things that we were unable to fully address in the other segments. But I want to lead with this question because we're heading, if you're not going digital, you're going to be left behind. And I want to just ask this question to Sean, and then we talk about the other issues that were raised. And the issue of small-scale farmers struggling with access to digital tools and modernizing their farming techniques. So I was wondering what solutions that can help bridge this gap to accelerate the digital adoption for productivity increase and so forth, because that is the direction in which agriculture is going. So I'm wondering what's happening there. And obviously, it begs the question or leads in segues to financing to adopt these innovative tools. So if you can give us your perspective there, and then I'll open the floor and we can talk about particular issues that were raised in previous segments. Over to you, Sean.
One of the things we've been promoting is rethinking of how it is that we deliver extension services. And one of the approach to that is introducing a digital approach as to how we reach farmers, how we reach the stakeholders, the primary stakeholders, and to encourage them how it is that they now can take advantage. In particular, a cell phone is no longer just a cell phone or just to watch, to look at Facebook. How it is now, the reorientation is how we now program persons to understand that there are business opportunities that can be had from these smartphones, whether it be Instagram, whether it be people sending them messages, whether it's a marketplace, how it is that we do that. And part of the policy solutions that we started to roll out is a regional agricultural digitalization program, strategy better yet. So in it, it deals with all segments of the value chain. It deals with how it is that we share and pass on information, how we develop information throughout the value chain. That is how we're looking at it from extension up.
Wonderful, Sean. Sorry to interrupt your answer, but definitely I encourage persons to share this segment. But I want to give Connect Caribbean World, since they're at the top of the program, Dr. Thomas, any specific questions you have for Sean Bull and also Gavin, and then we head on over to John and Chris.
Yes. Okay, Sean, I have one question for you. Now, we at Connect Caribbean, we would be moving, our routes would include Guyana, Suriname, and also Dominica. Now, we have been at a loss to find information that will tell us what are the crop specializations or animal husbandry specializations of each country. What are they good at right now? Do you have that information that you can share with us? What's outstanding about Guyana, outstanding about Suriname, outstanding in terms of Dominica, in terms of their capacity? Because, example, we have routes to go into U.S. Virgin Islands, routes to go, so that's very important.
What I can share with you, a few years ago, we developed an investment profile for the entire region, which highlighted the major crops that are produced in each member state, as far northeast as Belize to as far south as Suriname. So there is a profile as to the type of crops, where it is grown, and so on, and contact information for in-country officials. So I could share that with you for you
Absolutely.
to look at and use. And it gives you a comprehensive view and understanding of what it is that exists.
Thank you very much, John. John, in terms of the points that you raised in connecting the dots, any specific thing that you didn't get to raise that you want to raise now, and even get Sean's perspective as well?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting from a regional perspective is the big elephant in the room in agriculture in the United States anyway is the cannabis industry that is burgeoning and having whether it's the growing of hemp and then the vertical integration into different products and the oils, the gummies, the different food products that are made. And I was wondering if there was any CARICOM addressing these, because each of the countries have different specific laws involving cannabis.
Well, what I can say, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'll come on. You go ahead.
No, what I can say, different individual member states have been approaching the cannabis industries from different angles. Some are more advanced than some, and some are in the infancy stage. At the two last Caribbean Week Agriculture, there was a extensive debate, conversation, discussion, investment opportunity on hemp and also marijuana and the benefits, whether it be medical, whether it be recreational, but the discussion is there, and different member states are at different levels and doing their own implementation schedule as to how it is that they can make use and benefit from this opportunity that exists.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Anthony.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So well, a couple of things that in the United States that is fundamental to the success of agriculture, period, across the country, and applicable to the U.S. Virgin Islands. Not sure about CARICOM. The elephant is government's disposition, government policy, government resources. And we're now seeing the other issue of the role of labor and immigrant workers and their contribution to the viability of the industry, the application of technology. All of those things are wonderful. But agriculture in the United States is successful because of a very proactive, strong position of subsidies by the US government in terms of why we have a viable agriculture industry. The role of technology, the type of technology, how you're going to apply infrastructure and create the ecosystem, again, comes down to what is going to be the government's disposition on the industry across the region. We know in the United States, agriculture is successful because of laws, policies, regulation, industry's dynamic infrastructure, and the resources behind it. And I'm curious to know, what is that situation like in CARICOM and the support for agriculture?
So if I may here as well jump in, what I can say is speaking on behalf of the developments that are happening in Guyana in terms of the hemp industry. The National Assembly back in 2002, and I'm subject to be corrected. Sean, you're in Guyana a bit more than I am. Back in 2002, the National Assembly would have passed the Industrial Hemp Bill, and I know that as part of a trade mission facilitated by the UK businesses, President Ali would have encouraged persons and actually stated that they've earmarked farming lands for the development of this hemp cultivation. However, it's not just about the cultivation, but far too often we leave products at the primary stage. And one of the things that President Ali has indicated is that this hemp cultivation must be linked to a processing facility to create that value added that is so necessary to extracting the value from the supply base that they're going to be creating. And I believe that it's around 50,000 acres that were earmarked for the development of this industry. So there's still an opportunity. And if anyone is interested, in exploring these opportunities, you just need to visit us at the Guyana office for investment to find out more about what is available and what are the opportunities. And I don't like to use the word potential or promises. There are opportunities that are to be explored.
Okay, thank you very much.
Connect the voices of Anthony and Gavin.
I believe Sean was going to respond to that, and then we'll come back to John and give Chris an opportunity to pose a question or a comment.
The direct response in terms of government support, it is there. And it's been there now for the past 4 to 5 years more than ever. It's the political will is there, the political support. We've seen in every single member state significant increases in the amount of budgetary allocation to agriculture. In some cases, in excess of 15%. So that not only are the governments talking, but they're also putting the monies there. There's increase for the support agriculture. There's increased provisions for investment. There's human resources being put in place, and there's even increase in the amount of public and private partnerships that's taking place throughout the region, and even government to government bilaterals and agreements have been taking place at record paces and in amounts that were unprecedented. So to answer your question, yes, there is government and political support to drive and grow agriculture and to make sure that we're food secure in the region.
Thank you very much, Sean. John?
Yes, I wanted to connect these voices and give it a case study of a project that I worked on in India called Rural Pro. And what was happening is that the government was subsidizing the farmers to grow their crops, and they would give them money to grow the crops. The problem is that once the farmers had the money to grow the crops, there was no ability for the government to get the crops back, okay? And so what we did was we set up kiosks in these rural areas where the kiosks using satellite transponders were able to get what kind of crop was being bought, the seeds, the fertilizer, when the crops were ready. And then the government knew that a farm in a particular location had the crop ready, the tomatoes or the mangoes or whatever, and then it was just a transportation problem to be able to bring these crops to the city instead of spoiling in the field. And so the crops were spoiling 50% by spoiling in the field with the crops. So each 1% feeds 1 million people. So when we talk about connecting these things that Anthony was talking about, the subsidies, the support by the government, we have to take this supply chain and bring it together in order to reach the market. And as Chris was talking about earlier, the financial resources then to enable the small farmers to thrive.
Okay, so Chris, do you want to jump in as we have 1 more minute left of the program? Do you want to just segue there to what John raised? Any other comments? That's for you, Chris. Do you have any other comments you want to? I don't think Chris is hearing me.
Jennifer?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to expand on what Gavin said about processing. Sure. He's absolutely correct. In the Virgin Islands, we are restricted as to what we can export in terms of it's the raw form of the produce. But what we have determined from a technological and infrastructure standpoint, what we don't have is a lot of food processing. If we were to invest in building out the infrastructure and the application of technology and do more food processing, we can export more to other markets, whether in the U.S. mainland or to the rest of the Caribbean.
Well, you just raised the right issue when we had conversations that raised the issue of what products are allowed to be exported to other islands. So that's even another conversation for another time. But I really want to thank each of you for being on Connect Caribbean Report today. I hope at some point that we can come back and further delve into other matters that we didn't have the opportunity to fully expound on here on Connect Caribbean Report. But I want to thank Chairman and CEO of Connect Caribbean, Ambassador Dr. Andre Thomas, for joining us. Thank you, Chris Principe, Publisher of Financial IT. Thank you, John Clendenin of the IC Group. And I want to absolutely thank my guest, Gavin Bagal, Trade and Logistics and Investment Specialist, and Sean Bull from the CARICOM Secretariat, responsible for our matters to do with agriculture here in CARICOM. And thank you for our guest that popped in, Anthony Weeks. He is the founder of Calendar Network and VI Source here on our TV. And we'll be back next week for another engaging and very thought-provoking program. And I want to again thank my guests. Thank you to the listeners and viewers for joining us today. Share this program, and you can even continue to pose your questions, and absolutely we will respond to those. So thank you much for joining us. We'll see you back here next week, same time, here on Connect Caribbean Report. And we thank you for joining us. Good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Welcome to our TV network, your ultimate destination for all things exciting and essential. From mouth-watering food to the latest in fashion, health, education, music, movies, and news, plus thrilling sports and breathtaking travel, our TV network brings it all to you. Tune in today and experience the best of every world, all in one place, rtv.network.